Let's talk with, woo, I broke something. Panther people, what up? Do you keep Frankie Louu and then let Brian Burns walk? I'll let you know. Hey, watching Panthers supposed to Phil Perkins. Thanks for joining. It's been a minute since I've done a recorded episode. There's just so much stuff happening in Pantherland, Pantherville. What's it called? I don't know. We got the hiring of Dave Canales. We got Dan Morgan sticking around as our general manager and VP of football operations, and also Brant Tillis. He doesn't get a news conference because he's a brainer. He doesn't have to deal with any of that stuff. He doesn't want to hang with us Neanderthals. Either way, with Tillis in mind, we're going to talk about which Panther unrestricted free agents are we going to want to keep around, and which ones are we just going to let walk? It's a brand new regime, minus Dan Morgan. He's in a new role, but I think that now that he is the captain now, that he is going to determine the direction of this team along with the help of, Brant Tillis, Dave Canales, and David Tepper. Hey, let's talk about a guy who made a late season surge, but was on the minds of Carolina Panthers fans, at least for content creators out there, and that is Smith Maret. He gave a spark to this offense whenever he touched the ball, whether it's jet sweeps, fake jet sweeps, vertical threat a little bit, some of those mid throws as well. He was a guy that offered something a little bit different than the rest of our wide receiver core. If you take a look at our wide receiver room, they're big, hulking dudes. Obviously, they're all good athletes, but Terrace Marshall, Adam Thielen, you got Laviska Shenault, you got Jonathan Mingo. All four of those guys are kind of the same build. They're big dudes. They're thick guys. DJ Chark, you could say, is a burner, but I think that burner title is a bit past him right now. I think the fastest days are behind him. But when it came to offering something a little bit different than those four guys who could not get any separation, just couldn't happen, whether it's scheme or just their physical ability at this point in time, they just couldn't do it. And then when they got the ball, there wasn't much that they could do. They were just a hulking mass, and they didn't really do much. Obviously, Laviska Shenault had his issues. We're going to talk about that health-wise, but they were all just kind of the same. They all had the same superpowers. And so you need someone who's a little bit different. You can't have four Batmans. You need one Flash. You need one Superman. You need a Wonder Woman. So in Smith Maret's case, he offered something a little bit different. He was the scat guy. He was one of those, it's like this new wave of wide receivers we're finding right now who are a little bit undersized, less than 200 pounds, but man, they got speed. And they got quickness. And that's exactly what Smith Maret brought into the kicking game, and he brought that into the wide receiver position. I think he could actually, depending on what they do in free agency and in the draft, I feel like he could find himself a role with this team. So I would 1,000,000% have Smith Maret on the Panthers team next year. So Laviska Shenault, I thought was going to have a bigger role. But just like in his first year with the Carolina Panthers, when they traded for him from Jacksonville, he broke down. And he is a big body. Like I said before, a lot of our wide receivers are kind of the same build. They're all thick dudes. They're not lean and mean like a Smith Maret or like a Tank Dell. We want to take a look at the Houston Texans as a model of how to build around a rookie quarterback. He just felt kind of muscle bound. And it looked like in the offseason he trimmed down a little bit, but it eventually caught up with him. He was in concussion protocol, and I don't think he was the same since. So unfortunately, Laviska Shenault, even with Dave Canales and his positivity out there trying to make the best of what the Panthers have, I don't think he's got a place on the team next year. Chark, he was a guy. I was in North Carolina driving back from Myrtle Beach. And by the way, no one warned me about Myrtle Beach, it being the way it is. I liked it, but then I'm going on the Twitter machine, and I'm kind of like the butt of people's jokes. Why didn't anyone warn me about that? Anyways, DJ Chark, he was the guy who I thought was going to be Ted Ginn Jr. 2.0, the burner. Not exactly an elite wide receiver, but just someone who is fast enough. Their number one skill is just speed, vertical speed, get separation, open up the field a little bit for your rookie quarterback. And that just never happened. It never happened for him. It didn't work. 2.3 yards, tied for 7th worst, and ranked in the bottom 10 in catch percentages in the National Football League. So unfortunately, we got a new coach right now. You got a stacked wide receiver draft, and I think you can get like a BC receiver in free agency that might have a little bit more production right now. So unfortunately, Laviska Shenault, DJ Chark, you gone. You want a picture of dog? Take a shot. If you want someone who's a dog on the team, take a shot against it. Sam Franklin is that guy. Whether it's on special teams, whether he's coming in on defense as well, he is a crap disturber. He gets under your skin. He gets in your face. He might have a penalty or two, but it's one of those good penalties like I'm here in Canada. In hockey, you fight guys still. Bare knuckle, fighting. to send a message. If your team is trailing 2-0 and you need a spark, what do? You beat somebody up. And so that's what Sam Franklin does. With his advanced age of 28 years old, I still think that he offers a lot on special teams and on defense and in the locker room as well. He is the DAWG that you want on this team to kind of set the stage for everybody. CJ Henderson, let him go. It was one of those Scott Fitterer moves that I thought was going to work out. They traded Dan Arnold, who was showing some promise in the tight end position. Obviously, they probably believed in Tommy Tremble a bit more and Ian Thomas for whatever reason. But that trade, Dan Arnold, who looked like he had a connection with Sam Darnold, and then just to let him go before week 5 for a guy in CJ Henderson, who was a reclamation project. And yes, it looked good on the surface. He's a top 10 pick out of Florida, but it just seemed like on the outside that the guy had issues on the field, whether it's to get motivated or whatever. And there've been moments where he played all right, but he has always been a liability, I think, in coverage. And with Ejiro Evero being he's been passed up for head coaching jobs twice now. Even in Carolina, I don't think he can. I know he's under contract. Well, maybe he wasn't offered a job anywhere, but I don't think he can mess around anymore. I think he wants his own guys, especially with I think this year we might actually, after when his contract's actually done, I can see us losing Ejiro Evero after this year. So I don't think he can make any mistakes. No stones unturned. I think CJ Henderson's got to go, and they got to look at potentially drafting a rookie cornerback with Dan Morgan in the room with Ejiro Evero getting exactly what he wants. JJ Jansen, long snapper, keep him. Why wouldn't you? Gross Matos, like Laviska Shenault, he was a guy that I made an isolated video for that I thought that he was going to make a big step this year. And I thought he did. You know what? There was a moment when Brian Burns was out, and I thought Yetur Gross Matos did all right. He's a 2020 second rounder. That was the Matt Rule draft. I think was that the all defensive draft? That is the defensive draft. But he's 26 years old right now. And I think you still believe in him. Unless with the draft picks that we got, we saw how the Panthers do in free agency. I think letting Hassan Reddick go kind of cursed the Panthers with their future free agent edge rushers to try to match up opposite Brian Burns. It just hasn't worked out with Justin Houston. It didn't work out with him when he signed with the Miami Dolphins. So it's a wrap. So I think it, and we'll see what DJ Johnson does. Doesn't seem like much. Yetur Gross Matos, again, 26 years old. I think he still can stay with this team and grow and continue to develop. I think he would benefit from being with Ejiro Evero for another season, and then maybe add some competition with a defensive end in the draft that isn't DJ Johnson, who I don't know what the future holds for that guy. I could see him being traded somehow as a change of scenery guy because it's a new regime here. Whether Dan Morgan wanted him there or not, maybe not. Let him go. Give Yetur another shot. Jeremy Chinn. Besides Ike Ekwonu, was there anyone else had disappointed more the Panther faithful than Jeremy Chinn? Started so strong in his rookie year. And maybe it was the change. You had Phil Snow as defensive coordinator, and then he had a regime change, and they got Ejiro Evero, who might not really use him at his strengths. And then we just saw less and less of Jeremy Chinn. And he went from being arguably what I thought was going to be one of the faces of the franchise. When Christian McCaffrey was here, he and Jeremy Chinn were working out together. We thought he's going to be this hybrid positionless football player, and he was going to take over, and he was going to be a menace, kind of like a Kyle Hamilton. I thought he was going to be like a Kyle Hamilton out of the Baltimore Ravens, and that just hasn't panned out, unfortunately. With Ejiro Evero still in the house and not much changing after that, I don't know. I see Jeremy Chinn excelling elsewhere. I don't think he's a bad player at all. I just think it's a scheme. I think it's injuries, and it's just one of the more disappointing things of last year for multiple reasons. And I think we just cap it off instead of try to force something to happen. And I think we let him go, unfortunately. Louu. He is a four-legged animal, dog. He's a dog. I'm taking a shot. Jeremy Chinn was one of the disappointments of this year, one of the bummers of this year. Frankie Louu was definitely one of the better parts of this defense. Not that the defense was up, but he was one of the best parts of this team in general. Joe Person from The Athletic points out that Brian Urlacher and Darrell Washington are the only players in the NFL history to hit marks of 236 tackles, 12.5 sacks, 29 tackles for a loss in 32 games beginning in the 2022 season. So in that time from only those two players, he is, and I hate to say it, I hate to compare because of the Polynesianness. And I'm just saying this, but just the way he plays is like Troy Polamalu. It's like he's almost like a Travis Kelce in the linebacker position. Luke Kuechly was on Kay Adams' show, and he was talking about how Travis Kelce doesn't really have a set route. He just kind of opens. He just finds himself open. He finds the openings. He goes to them. He gets touchdowns. He gets multiple touchdowns. He sees red, Taylor Swift. And then Frankie Louu was kind of like that. I feel like there's no play for him. He just kind of feels the flow of the play and the direction of play, and I think he just makes the most of it. For not a massive guy, he packs a punch against offensive linemen. I think he's a disruptor. He gets in people's heads. And I think with Dan Morgan, linebacker, most tackles in Super Bowl history, being the general manager, VP of football operations, I think they set him up either with a free agent linebacker, or they lock him down and they get a rookie that could be more of a physical freak, something that we thought Brandon Smith out of Penn State was going to be. But I think they link him up together, and I think they make music. Burns. This is Dan Morgan being the dad, cleaning up after his teenage son had a house party while he was out on vacation. So Dan Morgan picking up what Scott Fitter, his buddy, messed up doing during his tenure as a GM. I think the fact that Ejiro Evero is back as a defensive coordinator, arguably Ejiro staying with the Carolina Panthers, might be one of the bigger acquisitions in the offseason, because if you let him go, the strength of the team, top 4 defense in the league, and you let him go and you bring in someone new, brand new system again, it's like having an offensive coordinator. We saw what happened with Jeremy Chinn. You can scheme guys out. You never know what you're going to bring in if you're bringing in a new defensive coordinator. The fact that he's still here, and that is a part of the field you don't have to worry about as much. And it's because of guys like Derek Brown, Frankie Louu, Brian Burns. I think, unless something crazy happens, well, I think the fact that also Brant Tillis is also a very large acquisition for this team. The fact that he could manage a Patrick Mahomes $500 million contract extension and still have that team in the Super Bowl. Obviously, the X's and O's are not the same as a Jaden Doe's, whatever that's. I'm so bad at saying it. You guys have probably known this by now. But I think Brant Tillis and company could probably work a way to either get Brian Burns a long-term deal that is team-friendly, but also making Brian Burns one of the higher-paid edge rushers in the NFL. He is a leader. He has a connection with Bryce Young. He locks down that one side of the defensive line, which is part of the outside spine of this defense, which is a third of the team. Like, you got defense down. It's offense that needs to work. Special teams is pretty good too. So, yeah, I think you need to franchise tag him if you can't work out a long-term deal. But I think with the addition of Brant Tillis, I feel like a long-term deal is possible, and he's a Carolina Panther for life. Because the last thing Dan Morgan needs on his resume right now, at the beginning and entering the infancy of his GM tenure with the Panthers, is being known as a guy who lets go of his best players. And he told this to Kyle Bailey at WFNC that they want to be a place where they keep their best players. They pay their best. You reward them. You don't punish them. But at the same time, we'll see what happens in the Super Bowl, but offense wins championships. I'm sorry. In this day and age, the NFL, that is what happens. And Bryce Young needs help. And if Brian Burns could be tagged and traded for a first and a second and a third, or something, maybe not 2 firsts and a second, but a first and another second, and you can get yourself a Rome Odunze in the first round, and then you can go interior offensive lineman, and then you can go Ladd McConkey with the other second round pick. I don't think anyone will be upset by that. I'm sorry. I don't. Because what was happening to the defense eventually in the fourth quarter in every single game that they lost? That was close. There weren't many, but the ones that were close. What happened? The defense bend, but they just continuously had to get back on the field. They got no breaks because the offense couldn't convert, couldn't sustain long drives. There were a couple, but it just didn't happen all the time. It didn't happen all the time. And so the defense would eventually break, and then the Panthers would lose a backbreaker. And then just let a silly play go. It's nothing to do with the players. It just had everything to do with exhaustion. I don't think they do it in the NFL, but at least in soccer, they have GPS on the guys to see how many kilometers or miles that they run. The Panthers defense is almost always on the field because the offense can't stay on the field. And if it means the defense gets a break and then you're scoring points and sustaining drives, that's an argument there. And eventually I'm going to do a series, a what-if series for Marvel fans out there. What happens if you let Brian Burns go, or what if you keep him? But in this situation, I think the best thing for the team to have some form of stability, something that you can rely on this team, is the defense. And then Brian Burns, Derek Brown, Frankie Louu, J.C. Horn, those are the guys that you rely on the defensive side. I think that's it. On the offensive side, it's jury's still out on Bryce Young. Taylor Moton, that's it. And then Adam Thielen, statistically, what he did. Those are the three guys, but I don't even think Adam Thielen's on the team next year if he wants to be or doesn't want to be. You got to keep it at that point. You happy with who I kept? You happy who I let go? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe. See you guys soon.